Welcome to the Dental Elements Podcast. I am your host today, Cindy Rogers, and with me we have Mark Johnson. He is the Student Loan Repayment Strategy Specialist. He is here today to share with us dental professionals how to tackle that student loan debt and make the best decisions to pay off the student loan debt, and also how it needs to pertain to your own personal wealth, your own journey. So please join me in welcoming Mark Johnson. All right, welcome back to the Dental Elements Podcast. Today we have with us Mark Johnson. Mark is a student loan specialist, so I'm sure many of us would love to hear his advice, and I'll let him introduce himself and tell us what he's all about.
Thank you so much for having me on today. Yeah, so my name is Mark Johnson. I've been in the wealth and investment advisory business for a little over 30 years. I'm a partner at RBF Wealth Advisors. We're based in St. Louis, Missouri. So we do comprehensive wealth management, investments, insurance, financial planning, helping folks put together budgets, all of those things. About 7 years ago, I got invited to do a presentation to a group of dental residents here in St. Louis. We talked about investments and insurance and financial planning, et cetera. I didn't mention the word student loans one time. I didn't know anything about student loans 7 years ago. And then this was a group of orthodontic residents. Several of them came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, we'd like to talk about maybe opening up an investment account when we graduate. But did you know that we were graduating? We got all this student loan debt." I said, "Well, how much student loan debt do you have?" One person had 400,000. I was like, "Wow, that's a lot of student loan debt." Another person had $750,000 of student loan debt. And I said, "You got to be kidding me." And they said, "No, this is, what it costs to get through dental school and 2.5-year residency program." And I was like, "Well, does the school, provide you any resources to figure out how to pay this off? Or, is there another financial advisor that's come in and talked to you guys about this?" Because at that point in time, I'd been in the investment and financial planning business for 25 years, and I'd never seen a presentation on student loan repayment planning. There was no CE courses that I could sign up for. My industry had pretty much all but ignored that crisis. And so as I started poking around a little bit, I thought, well, I don't know anything about student loans, but I know you guys got to deal with your student loan debt before you start thinking about investing, right? And so I tried to see if I could find a resource for them to refer them to figure out how the best way to repay their student loans, and I couldn't. And so that was the genesis of Student Loans RX. And so we started that company, and today I work with almost 200 dental professionals. I've got some medical professionals, some few pharmacists, couple veterinarians, one podiatrist, and so my wife's an RN. Before the podcast, we were talking. My daughter's a dental assistant in the Air Force, so got quite a bit of personal connections in the healthcare space, and then knowing what dental professionals have to do to get through dental school. But we also work with other folks that have student loan debt as well. But that's kind of that's kind of my story. That's how we kind of got into the student loan planning business.
Wow, that's a great niche to have, because it's definitely one that, like you said, needs to be talked about more. And there is no CE. You take on all the student loan debt, you graduate, you start working, and then you're left to figure it out yourself, unless you hire somebody like you that happens to put that into perspective with wealth management. So yeah, thank you for starting this important business for sure.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Yeah. So can you tell me, first of all, I'd like to know about the current events going on with interest rates being interest being dropped during the pandemic, and then they keep prolonging them, but the cutoff date's coming soon. And what's going to happen with that? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So because of COVID, back on March 13th, 2020, President Trump suspended interest and payments on most federal student loan debt. So if somebody went to the student aid office, financial aid office at school and took out loans, presumably most of those loans, were through the Department of Education. And so most of those loans have been suspended in terms of interest and payments since March 13th. President Biden has extended that program. They were supposed to turn things back on February 1st, and then they've extended it now through May 1st. So if if that's what they decide to do, interest accrual and payments for anyone required to make payments. Like if you're in school, you don't have to make payments, right? Your loans are deferred, your payments are deferred while you're in school. Interest still accrues while you're in school, but payments are deferred. So if you're required to make payments, you'll have to start making payments again in May, and interest will start accruing again in May unless they extend it again.
Okay, but there won't be back interest, correct? Because
There
it's
won't
stopped.
be, correct. So interest accrual stopped from March 13th through April 30th. So just over 2 years of interest that did not accrue. So, for example, the average dentist graduates with around 350,000 of student loan debt, and so for that individual not having interest accrual for 2 years, that was just about 40 grand, $40,000.
So
So
we
that
want
was
to,
that was a nice,
yeah, for sure, a good break. But then reality is that's not going to last forever, and student loans aren't. Most of them aren't going away, anytime soon. So
correct.
yeah. So what do you recommend to your clients as far as payback structures, and what's the best way that you see that you would recommend?
So I'm going to show you a quick slide here. What we recommend is when you're addressing your student loans. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I
Um,
can.
so we recommend that you address your student loans in, you know, take a 360-degree approach, because whatever you're going to do with your student loans, especially if you have six figures of student loans, that's going to impact all the other areas of your life. So we typically start out, we help our clients create a budget. Okay, what's your income? What are your living expenses? Because after that, then we can figure out, okay, well, how much can you afford to put towards your student loans? And then from there, we can figure out what's the best plan. Obviously, you've got some insurance if you're working, you've got employee benefits, maybe you're contributing to a retirement plan at work. Um, you might want to put money into a Roth IRA. If you're a dentist, you might be saving to buy a practice one day, and then hopefully there's a little bit of money left over for fun, right? But so we believe that the best way to approach student loans, or really any other financial planning matters, to do it in a comprehensive way, because all of these pieces fit together. So if you just isolate your student loans and say, I want to do X with my student loans, how's that going to impact all of the other areas of your financial life? So that's the first thing I would say, is you really want to address your student loans in the context of a comprehensive financial plan. Now, to your second question about what's the best plan for repayment, we try to build that plan based on their career goals and their family situation. So if somebody's married, they got a spouse that works, if they're just going to be an employee and not an owner, then there's some programs in the federal program. One of them is called income-driven repayment plans. So these are good plans. These first two here, pay as you earn and revised pay as you earn, those are the current plans that most people take a look at. And it depends on whether you're single or married, what your household income is. But an income-driven repayment plan, you can actually take your student loans, and your payment will not be more than 10% of your discretionary income. So let's say you've got a household income of $120,000. Okay, your payment on your student loans is going to be less than $1,000 a month. Okay, coming out of school, though, you know, depending on what your job is, I don't know what a first year hygienist makes, but let's say you make 65, $70,000. I don't know is that a close number?
It just depends on how many days you work and which area of
Uh,
which state you work in. So
Okay,
yeah. But that
but
sounds like a good fare.
anyway, the payments based on your income. Now, every year you have to recertify your income. So as your income goes up, your payment goes up as well. you can be on these plans for as long as 20 or 25 years. Now, I don't recommend that, because if you spent $100,000 to go to school and you stretch those payments out over 20 or 25 years, now you spent $200,000 to go to school. Or if you spent $350,000 to go to dental school, now you spent $700,000 to go to dental school. So our goal is to help our clients pay down their student loan debt in certainly 10 years or less. And some are able to do that. So income-driven repayment is a very popular uh, plan. There's two programs, pay as you earn or revised pay as you earn. They're very popular um, for recent graduates. You mentioned interest rates. Once interest rates are very, very low right now, although they're going up over the next year. Federal Reserve says that they're going to raise interest rates. We don't know yet exactly where they're going to end up over the next year or so, but they've been very, very low because of COVID. And so now they're going to start raising interest rates. So for those clients of ours that are in a position to pull their loans out of the federal program, so interest rates on federal loans are like 6.5% for today's graduates. Okay, so when
Wow.
interest gets turned back on May 1st, their loans are going to start accruing interest, just north of 6% in most cases. And so if somebody's in a financial position to refinance those loans, like a lot of people are familiar with refinancing your house, right? You have a $200,000 house and your interest rate is 5%. Well, if a lender will refinance that 200,000 at 3.5%, you'd probably be foolish not to do that. Right? So
Mhm.
same thing applies to student loans. If your student loans are currently in the federal program accruing interest at 6% and you can get a private lender, here's just kind of a sample list of some of the big private lenders we work with, especially in the dental and medical space. Some of these lenders right here might be able to refinance your student loan debt for as little as 2.5 or 3% right now on a
Uh,
10 or 15 years. So that's significant savings.
Okay, and so for people that aren't on watching this on YouTube, they can't see the screen. So some of the private lenders that you're talking about,
So there's
um,
a whole cottage industry
okay,
that's evolved around private refinancing. Some of the big ones that we use, and we have no relationship with any of these companies, so it's just finding the lowest interest rate, the for the payment amount that we're looking for over a specific number of years. But Laurel Road, does we do a lot of refinancing with Laurel Road. They actually have a 0.25% discount for members of the ADA, so they tend to have a very competitive rates. Um, Anybody that has student loans has probably seen a lot of ads on TV from SoFi. Another one is credible.com. Credible.com is kind of like the Travelocity of student loan refinancing. So you fill out a profile and they send your information out to maybe as many as 10 or 12 different lenders. And so they come back with, various offers from different lenders, both variable and fixed rate. And so right now, for those clients that are, you know, in a financial position to refinance at some of these historically low interest rates, we're providing some advice around that as well.
okay, so you do recommend obviously refinancing because you can lock it in at a lower rate right now instead of having it go up to 6% and then and it could creep up even more. You don't know for sure, right?
So, well, when you took out the loans, there was a set rate on that particular loan you took out in fall semester of 2020, right? It said right on the document 6.5%. So once you've taken the loan, the rate isn't going to go up higher unless maybe you have some private loans. Sometimes students go to Sallie Mae or Wells Fargo or Discover Bank and get a private loan, maybe a parent co-signed on that loan. And those loans can be 9, 10%. And they could be variable, which means as interest rates go up, they're likely to go up as well. So again, everybody's situation's unique, right? And so you want to be careful when you pull loans out of the federal program and refinance them with a private lender. That's just like a mortgage payment now. Okay, there's no forgiveness programs. There's no you can't, during COVID, anybody that had private loans still had to make their payments during COVID. So the forbearance that President Trump and then what was extended by President Biden, that forbearance was only particular to federal student loans, not private loans. So, you don't want to just run out and refinance your loans. It just depends on your situation. If you have the financial resources to maintain that payment now for 10 or 15 years, um, today anyway is a good time to consider that. Now, some people might say, well, right now there's no interest on my student loans until May 1st. I'm going to wait until May. And I'm like, well, don't let the tail wag the dog, right? Because what happens is we're only talking about 2 months. Okay. Um, so you got, well, 2.5, I guess almost 3 months. But you got 3 months of no interest, but then you might have 10 years of interest. And so you got to weigh the benefit of refinancing now at low rates with the risk of what if rates go up over the next 3 or 4 months. So if I can lock in today at, let's say, 3%, would that be better locking in at 3% today or waiting until May? Let's say interest rates are up at 3.25 or 3.5. I could have locked in at 3. So don't let 3 months of zero interest cloud your judgment on what you're going to be making payments on maybe for the next 7 to 10 years.
Yes, that's a good point. And then I think some of the fear is that because if once you refinance those loans and then you're not in the federal program, and so if there is forbearances or they cut off interest for 2 years, you don't get that benefit, correct? So that's like one of the risks that you take.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, to my knowledge, there hasn't been an interest forbearance that I know of in the past. I think it was a very unique,
Right.
obviously, global pandemic happens, every 100 years. And so it's very unusual that the government would turn off interest for
Mhm.
this length of time. There are a number of, forgiveness programs for healthcare professionals, depending on what your job is. There's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. That's 10 years working in a federally qualified health clinic. You make small payments over that period of time. And then at the end, if there's anything left over, they forgive it tax free. There's certain state forgiveness programs that are available. There's obviously, I mentioned I have a daughter who's a dental assistant in the Air Force. The military offers some forgiveness programs. Uh, Indian Health Services offers some forgiveness programs. So there's a variety of different services out there for uh, uh, forgiving or helping graduates with their student loan debt. Some of those programs will actually give you like a scholarship. So they send you, I know in certain states, you can get a 2-year scholarship if you're a dentist and you go work in a rural area. They'll give you like $25,000 a year towards your student loans. They just send you a check and you have to take that money and prove that you put it towards student loans. So those loans could be in a private lender. They wouldn't have to be in the federal program. So it really is, there's a lot of moving parts, is I guess
Yeah, yeah, for
the
sure.
short answer. And so I just encourage people to really do their homework and make sure that they're getting information from qualified individuals, because there's a lot of moving parts and there's some nuances that, if someone isn't familiar with all the different programs, they might get on the wrong plan. Wouldn't know it for a while anyway.
Yeah, everybody has their own path and their own financial planning, so it's good to have it individualized, like you said, speak to a specialist that can help them make these decisions and determine what's best for them and their overall, wealth package, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Do you have any resources or where our audience would look for these positions that would have, debt repayment options or student loan repayment options, forgiveness? I've seen some like in the ads in the past, but
So I'm gonna answer that the same way my wife asked me a question. I say, ask the Googler. you
okay, yep,
know
okay.
so Google it. So when you just type in forgiveness programs and be very specific, there's state programs. There's so sometimes the financial aid offices in the different schools will have resources that say, for example, in dentistry, um, the National Health Service Corps. Okay, they have scholarships for people going into public health. So the other thing too is The association. So I don't know if the American Dental Association, the Association for, I don't know what the official name is for registered hygienists, but on their websites they might have some resources. There's chat groups on those different various things. So there's not one place to go, and it is very particular to location and occupation, and then the type of entity that you work in. So if you're going to work in a let's say a DSO, right, or you're going to work in a private practice, obviously that would be a negotiated item. So if you're going to go work at wherever, if you're looking to change jobs, or I would say, that could be part of the negotiation you would have with your employer. Say, hey, I've got all this student loan debt. Can you include some reimbursement? For if I sign a 3-year contract with you or a 2-year contract with you, could you help me out a little bit with my student loans?
That is a great point, especially right now when the job market is so open, and to be able to retain great employees, that's a great benefit, with
Yeah,
the contract, of course, so you're not writing off somebody's debt and then have them leave you, but
right.
yeah, yeah, great idea. Uh, so with new graduates, we do speak to new graduates, as well a lot, and what would you encourage them to do as soon as they graduate, or right before they graduate, or what kind of advice do you give new grads?
Sure. So we typically start working with clients a few months before graduation, because typically they're starting to look for work. They're starting to poke around. Maybe they do some job shadowing. One of the services we provide is to review their employment agreements. So if they're out visiting 2 or 3 different offices and they get a couple, 2 or 3 different preliminary offers, we'll schedule a visit with them. We're not an attorney. I'm not an attorney. We don't give any legal advice, but we'll say, okay, we're just focused on the financial piece of the contract, right? Pay and benefits. And so if they're looking, if they're coming right out of school, they may have never read an employment agreement before, right? They probably
Right.
didn't have a long employment agreement if they worked at the hardware store or the, Starbucks or wherever, who knows? They may not have had a job since high school.
Mhm.
And so we provide that uh, service to kind of review those contracts with them so that they understand kind of what the financial pros and cons are of each of those contracts. We always recommend before they sign any contract is to have it reviewed by an attorney. And if they don't know anyone, we have a few resources that we can point them to in that area. But you want to start looking at a few months before graduation, because again, we build your student loan plan kind of around your career path and your personal situation. And so, it's not a one size fits all. If somebody's going on to residency after graduation, that's going to be one track of planning. If they're going to work in public health, that's another track of planning. If they're going to work in a DSO or in a private practice, that could be another, or the military. So there's, 4 or 5 different paths that people can take if their goal is to be a practice owner, or if they're going to be an independent contractor. I know in the hygiene field that you can work theoretically in multiple locations, right? You can have your own business and you can be an independent contractor and work in a number of different spots. You don't have to just be employed in one dental practice. And so, depending on how you're going to structure your career, your student loan planning should be consistent with that.
Right, yeah, and there's a lot to that, aspect, but what would you say the biggest mistakes are in repayment planning?
Let's see. So probably the biggest mistakes is not one of them is not to have a plan ready to go by graduation. Okay, so typically, folks that have federal student loan debt, once you graduate, you have a 6-month grace period where you don't have to make payments on those federal student loans. Now, in the last 2 years, interest has been turned off, so it really didn't matter. Okay, but this year for graduates, they graduate in May and June. So if they have a 6-month grace period, let's say you've got 200,000 in student loan debt over that 6-month grace period, that's probably about $6,000 of interest that's going to accrue. Now just because you don't have to make a payment doesn't mean you couldn't make a payment or shouldn't make a payment. And so if you get enrolled in an income driven repayment plan right out of school, you can start making a payment. The other thing is on one of the repayment plans, it's called revised pay as you earn. That's an income driven repayment plan. It has a pretty nice interest subsidy that some people would qualify for. It's up to 50% of your interest could be subsidized by Uncle Sam or forgiven, however you want to say that. And so I would just say that, procrastination is never a good idea in any aspect of life, but underneath the hood, you've got this motor that's cranking out all this interest, and even though you don't see it, on May 1st, that's going to start up again. And so I would say, don't procrastinate. Have a plan in place, before graduation. Um, Obviously, I would say just because your classmate is doing X with their student loans doesn't necessarily mean that's the best plan for you. Everybody's situation's different, so don't think that don't think that your friend's plan is your plan. And then I would say also is, there's a lot of information out there, but it's so easy to put together a YouTube or a TikTok or whatever now. And so there's a lot of people that are giving advice that are maybe not qualified to give advice. I mean, there's videos out there right now that you can pull up and say, you don't need to go to the dentist to get your teeth cleaned. Here's how you do it at home. Okay.
Correct.
So, I mean, you know,
Yes, anybody
I,
could write an article, anybody could do YouTube, anybody could do
yeah.
TikTok. It doesn't mean
So,
it's
so they say that you
correct.
need to,
Yeah.
to become an expert on a topic. I don't know if you've heard this. You're supposed to have 10,000 hours of experience in that area. And so I would say that, if you can find someone that has actually done this and has actually worked in the space and has expertise, with student loans, find out how long have you been doing this, ask for references. um, how many plans have you put together? Do you just focus on the student loans, or do you incorporate that into an overall financial plan? So I just say ask good questions before you pull the trigger on any plan.
Yeah, and just knowing what questions to ask, which you've helped us with a lot. Thank you. Because you don't
Yeah.
know the questions even exist until you've done some research and stuff as well. So with that, you were talking about the 6 months after you graduate, how you have no interest or you don't have to make a payment. So a lot of people, do you see these in your clients where they have those 6 months, they don't make a payment, so they think they have all this extra money, and so they'll go out and buy an expensive house or expensive car, and then it comes time 6 months later to also add in their student loan payment, and then they're
Sure.
extra
Well,
in trouble
obviously,
because they
my
thought they had all
clients
this
don't
extra
do
money.
that. My clients don't do that because I advise them not to. But
Yeah, if they
some of
catch
them.
you first.
So yeah, that's true. So yeah, depending on what role you're going to have after, you might have been, if you're a dentist, you've been in school for 8 years. If you went on to residency, you might have another year, 2, 3 years. So our culture is very consumer driven, right? And so um, we see all these ads on TV, TikTok ads. I mean, everything, buy, 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 buy. Right now, you can get things where um, they used to have layaway. When I was a kid, I remember that some of the stores had layaway plans where you could,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
now you can do that online, right? Where you buy now, pay later. And then credit cards and all this stuff. So my encouragement to graduates is get a financial plan. The first thing you need to work on is a budget. Okay, what's my income? What are my living expenses? I'm not talking about, when I say living expenses, I'm like rent, utilities, those type
I mean, to
groceries,
stay
the
alive,
base the
expenses.
basic the
Yes.
basics. Okay, and then what can I afford? What can I afford to spend on fun, and what do I need to set aside for student loans, savings, investments? We always recommend, getting an emergency savings fund built up. So 3 month expenses, roughly, as a first benchmark. So prior to COVID, I used to get a lot of pushback on that from clients. Why do I need to have 3 months of living expenses sitting in a savings account earning Zero. I'm like, well, I don't know. We don't know what the emergency is going to be. Okay. But at some point in your life, there's going to be an emergency, and you're going to want to have some money set aside, because instead of it being an emergency, it could be a, catastrophic emergency. So having some money set aside. Well, COVID hits, and a lot of dentists, a lot of dental offices were closed for a couple, 2 or 3 months. And if you were getting paid on production, you had no income. And
Right.
so now the government stepped in and sent everybody a bunch of money and all that stuff too. But what I'm saying is that, there is a process of creating wealth and being successful with your finances. Unfortunately, we don't learn that unless you go take a finance degree in college or something. Maybe there's one class in high school on personal finance or something. But having a budget, setting aside some money for emergencies, setting aside some money for the future in investments, that's how you build wealth. And then managing your debt. So, people want to own a home, but homes are very expensive. And a home is a lot more expensive than just the payment. And first-time home buyers generally don't understand that. There's a lot of things that go along with owning a home. We're in St. Louis here, every 20, 25 years, you got to put a new roof on your house. Okay. Well, if you buy a 15-year-old house, that means you got 10 years to save for a $15,000, $20,000 roof. So where is that in the budget? And so what happens is people don't budget for upcoming expenses. If you own a home, you have upcoming expenses. If you have a car, you have upcoming expenses every 3-4 years, depending on how many miles you drive. You got to put new tires on your car, right? So what happens is when people don't save for those expected expenses, it ends up getting thrown on a credit card, right? And that's how people end up with $10, $15, $20,000 on credit cards, is because they never set aside the money for expenses. Now, again, emergencies happen, but if you have an emergency fund, then you don't have to go to your credit card. People shouldn't be using your credit card as your emergency backup plan.
Yes, absolutely. Great. So tell us where we can find you, and information like that, and how we can find links to get in contact with you.
Sure. Thank you. So you can visit our website at studentloansrx.com. That's studentloansrx.com. We do offer a free 30-minute consultation. So if people are interested and they just have some questions, they just click on the free consult button. It takes them to our needs assessment. They just fill out a little bit of information, and then we can schedule a visit. We also, you can call me. My phone number is 314-737-8123. That's 314-737-8123. And then our resources page on our website is continually being added to. And so we have a number of podcasts already on the website under our resources page that people can click on and listen to. And obviously we'll have this podcast posted up there shortly. And then also we do have our full length. It's like an hour and 6 minutes. So, get a soda and some chips or something, or some healthy snack, and sit down on the couch and listen. It's an hour and 6 minutes long, and it's our entire presentation it's called Smart Strategies for Student Loan Repayment. And we'll be adding, more shorter resources, but you can obviously turn it on and turn it off and listen. So those would be a couple ways you can get a hold of us.
Yeah, that's great. Lots of good resources for sure. And I will put these links. So we'll put these links in the show notes too. So it's easy to find them and click right on the links. So we think we'll get that information from you guys if we don't have it already. For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mark. And
thanks, Cindy.
I think
really
now's
nice
a great time. Yeah, now's a great time to reach out to you. Like you said, you only have 2 months. So you want to get on his list before he gets too busy, right? It's going to be a busy
Cindy.
time. Yes. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Dental Elements Podcast. Be sure to share, like, and subscribe.